Yeah. So just quickly, what we're doing, what we are at Accountable. So I think Susie mentioned it. LexOffice, it's a very good bookkeeping tool. We're more kind of a tax app trying to do bookkeeping below the hood to make this easy. That's why we working on all those tax issues. Basically, it's a couple of screens, and you can manage your taxes out of your smartphone app. So just give you a quick wrap up. What's the background of Accountable? And I think Andreas made a great presentation, giving his background as a tax advisor. I think that's pretty clear. So I would say let's dive straight into end of year income tax tips. I've named it. Andreas, you want to take it from here? We've discussed before. What is something that people could be looking at now, very concrete, to optimize their tax burden?
Yeah, it's every year you have to, or every break of 1 year, or if you start from 1 year to another, you have to think about shifting income from 1 year to another. This is the one thing you have to think about. Most of the case, it's all about shifting income from 1 year to another. So because the reason is, the best way, or the overall tax burden would be lower if all of your income would be the same every year. So if you have, if it varies a lot, let's say 1 year you have 30,000 euros of income, next year 50,000 euros of income, overall you pay too much taxes. It would be better to shift 10,000 from 1 year to the other, so that you have in both years 40,000 euros of income, and your tax burden is a lot of, let's say, a few hundred euros lower than instead of being 30 and 50,000 euros. So you have to think about to shift some income if your income is not the same. And the simple things are, let's say, writing your invoice later. Say you're working right now in December, think about charging your client right now, or in January. Maybe it's better to charge in January because the income flows into next year, and then it's taxable in next year. The same other way around, maybe you can get some advance payments. Working next year, you charge them right now, get the money in December, and then it's taxable in December. These are some easiest ways, and you can do this. Other way around, let's say expenses, it's the same. If you need some, let's say, a new computer, and you can think about buying it right now or next year, maybe it's better to buy it right now, or next year you have to think about it. There are some additional expenses or standard deductions that you can use. It's called in German Investitionsabzugsbetrag. It's quite a huge word. This is, let's say, if if you have some plannings buying a computer next year, or a car, something more expensive, you can deduct 40 to 50% right now of the expenses in this year and reduce your 2020 income. This is something you can think about, if you prepare your next year's tax return to put it in 2020. It's also the same for your private expenses. Let's say if you pay health insurance, you are private health insured. If you want to lower your tax burden right now, shift, let's say, income from this year to the next, you can pay your private health insurance this year for the next 2.5 years. This is a standard tax tip. You can talk to your health insurance company and ask them whether it's possible to pay 2.5 years in advance. And if you can do that, you save a lot of money by paying the taxes right now and shifting the income from one to the next. There's an additional tax advantage if you do so. Let's say liability insurances, any rental insurances, private rental insurances, they are usually not deductible because your health insurance is much higher than the cap, than the limit. And so those expenses are usually not deductible. So if you pay your health insurance, private health insurance right now for the next 2.5 years, next years you can deduct liability insurance and you shift some money from one year to the other. So these are some tax tips that belongs to shifting income. In addition, you have to think of, let's say, think about private expenses. There are two things you have to consider. The one is on the slide is extraordinary expenses called außergewöhnliche Belastung. And the other one is refurbishments or any household services. There are two things you have to keep in mind. Extraordinary expenses are, let's say, you buy new glasses or dentists, any other expenses that most of the taxpayers don't have. If you want to deduct those expenses, you have to have a limit of expenses, otherwise it's not deductible. In German, it's called zumutbare Eigenbelastung. So, and this amount depends on the whole amount of income you have, and your family status and number of children you have. So let's say if you're married and have 2 children and a piece of special amount of income, then usually the amount you have to reach is lower than if you're single and don't have any children. So to save money is you have to pay all of these amounts. The best way is to pay all of these amounts in 1 year. So let's say you want to buy glasses and you know next year you want to go to the dentist, or you have to go and have some expenses next year. You should buy your glasses next year because you should sum up all amounts in 1 year. Otherwise it gets lost and you couldn't deduct the expenses because it's not all the limit.
So Andreas, just a question
to
clarify. If someone is looking at an operation or something, that also makes sense to have this within 1 calendar year to put together the expenses in 1 year.
Yeah, what do you mean by operations? Operations, you go to the doctors. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's say if you don't have any expenses in 2020 and you need to buy glasses, go to a dentist operation, put everything in 1 year, and then the deduction is probably higher than if you spread it through different years. And if you want to, let's say, take the best advantage, the best way is to have the highest income in this year, because then the deduction is higher, of course, the tax advantage. Usually this is something that you couldn't plan, because let's say if there's any issue, usually you have to pay it right now and you couldn't plan it. But between the years, between 2020, 2021, maybe you can shift one of those expenses and save a lot of money. If we look at these home expenses, let's say if you need to repair something, if you have a private relocation, if you move and the moving expenses are not deductible, if you have someone repairing your washing machine, a painter, cleaning the stairs in your household, or cleaning service, these expenses, they have a maximum. So if those expenses exceed 6,000 euros, that wouldn't be deductible. So you couldn't deduct a maximum of 6,000 euros. Otherwise, the rest of it goes lost. So it's the usual cases. Let's say someone want to renovate their home and do a lot of those things. You get very easily more than 6,000 euros of those expenses, and then you lose a lot of taxes. So in those cases, it's better to shift those expenses in the next year if you don't have any expense, or if you exceeded this cap this year. So these are the most important things on private expenses you have to consider. All the other expenses, let's say the special depreciation, or these Investitionsabzugsbetrag, or anything else, what these let's say benefits that the government gives you, and saying, oh, you could deduct this year more than next year to save some taxes. It's usually not a tax tip, it's not a tax saving. If you do so, you have to think about having the same amount of income each year. So it could be a bad tax tip if you, let's say, have high deductions this year and pay the tax on next year, and next year it's probably higher. So think about this. think the next very important thing is we have to talk about, let's say, business costs to deduct. What is deductible? And there's one thing you have to keep in mind, that every expense that belongs to your business is, in principle, is deductible. So you have to make the case, you have to discuss, or you could discuss this with the tax office. And if it's reasonable, then usually it is deductible. Of course, there are some cases that's pretty sure that's not deductible. For example, if you buy some clothes, and even if you are working, let's say, as a lawyer and you need a suit, that's usually not deductible because the tax office says, okay, you can wear this suit for private use, and so therefore it's not deductible. So there are some cases you have to check. But usually, if you are saying the expenses are for business purpose, then it's deductible. Let's look at the home office right now. It's very, especially most of you or many of you are working in the home office right now. It seems that most of you are working or watching this at home. There's one rule, a bad rule, that's makes it harder to deduct those expenses. Let's say you need an own office for working in a home office, then it's deductible. So if you're working in your living room, for example, or in the kitchen at the usual table, then the room expenses are not deductible if you're using a home office. There are some tips around this topic. Let's say if you have a studio, so there's no desk and a computer on it, you not working in, it's not an office room, let's say something different. Let's say you're working as a photographer, take photos, and you're working as a video editor, let's say, then it's not an office, and then you can deduct the expenses for this room or part of this room. So it's these home office rules, these strict home office rules, that's not deductible, or just a limited deductible. They're just for office rooms and not for
Andreas,
any other
concerning the office rules, the rules are quite strict, and the tax office actually checking on this, right? They sending you information and want to see the floor plan, the square meters, and you have to kind of prove that this is like a separate room you're having. And if you have like already, I see like one guy there with a home trainer in the back, that's already something the tax office would say, hey, that is not an office.
Yeah, that's the usual way that you have to prove it, as you said, with the plan of your apartment. And what they also could do is they could come to you and check whether it's an office or whether it's a guest room, for example, or a living room. So they can do this. They will send you a letter beforehand, so don't be too much afraid. So you can use this information, so they're not surprising you, ringing at your door. But this is something that they can do. Usually, it's quite simple. If you send them a floor plan and probably a picture of this room, usually they don't ask again. And in many cases, it's a maximum of 1,250 deductible. And in those cases, then usually don't check this. But on the other way, let's say you have a two-room flat, and with, let's say, 60 square meters, and you're saying, okay, 45 square meters of the 60 square meters I'm using for business, they probably will check you. So this is quite unusual that, let's say, 45 square meters is for business and the rest of it you're sleeping, living in, what else. So it
has to be plausible for the guy looking at the data, and then you might be able to do that. There's also like other options how to deduct your home office related costs, right?
Yeah. Additionally, you can also always deduct your desk and other furniture you use for your business. So if you are not able to deduct the expenses for the room, you can deduct the furniture and, of course, computer, a lamp, what else you need for your business. And
there's also the coffee machine and the carpet.
yeah, this is so. If some of my clients put this in their expenses basket, I will put this in the tax return, and usually they won't ask for it. If it's a coffee machine for 2,000 euros, maybe the Finanzamt will check this. I don't know. On the other hand, it's depreciated over, let's say, 5 years, so it doesn't take too much into account. So they probably wouldn't check this. So I would give him a try. But usually it's probably most of the cases you're working as a developer at home and you don't have any clients at your home. It's usually not deductible. But
So
yeah, carpet, maybe.
Because we had this question in another webinar, the use case would then be you have the coffee machine not to drink coffee yourself, but to offer it to a client that visits you, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's right. And also any partners you're working with. So it's not necessary to have just clients. So any business partner. So yeah, this is something you could do. It's not that much. Usually it has a limit, of course, because it's just furniture, some coffee machine, and that's it. What you also could do is you can have not a home office. You could rent an office outside of your home. And it's not necessary to have this office, let's say, in another city or in next house. It could be in the same house, but so it could be at the neighbor's flat. If it's not possible to go, let's say, naked to your office room, then it's an extra office and then it's not a home office. And then you can deduct 100% of those expenses. So I haven't seen to do it vice versa. So you could rent the office room from your neighbor and he rents it out from you. I haven't seen this, but in principle, it would be possible, yeah. Additional to home office work equipment, as I said, is always deductible. If you have expensive work equipment for more than 800 euros, you have to depreciate it over the time you should use it. Usually it's 3 years for computers and technical stuff. If you have furniture, it's 10 years, so you couldn't deduct it all at once in this year. This is something you have to keep in mind if you buy, let's say, furniture or a car. It's not reducing your income by 30,000 euros, so just a part of it. Especially for English-speaking freelancers, job training, this is very interesting. So, many of my English-speaking clients are doing German lessons to get German clients, of course. So I think this is your decision. If you want to have some German clients, of course, you have to learn German. And you can argue that those expenses are deductible. Of course, any job training that are really connected with your business, let's say if you're working as a social media manager and you're doing some Google trainings, of course, this is deductible. But sometimes it could be more private. Let's say if I'm working as a tax advisor and I do some yoga courses, yoga trainings, that's probably not deductible because I don't want to earn money with yoga training. So you have always think about, sometimes it could be mixed. Let's say you're going to, if you learn Spanish and going to Mallorca, then of course it could be more private, or you could, let's say, depending on the amount you're going on this training, could be part-time deductible, let's say 50%, if you're going 50% of the time to trainings and 50% private.
Just looking at the time, so if anybody has some questions brought, just bring them in now at any time. We're happy to answer your questions. You can put them in the chat and we'll take it up, or you just raise your hand and you can ask Andreas directly. Then if nothing comes up, I think we just go through the bullet points we've prepared, but so nobody leaves the room without having their questions answered, just to be sure.
Yeah, so guys, if you have questions, feel free to unmute and go ahead and shoot. I'll give that a couple of seconds maybe.
Yes, so I have the question for the home office again, even though it was extensively covered. So right now, for example, in my situation, I don't have specifically this dedicated home office in my apartment. but the client that I work for, they explicitly don't give us the chance to go to the office because it's forbidden to go to the office. So does this make any change? So I'm not able to perform my job at the client's place because it's forbidden to go there.
Yeah, so it wouldn't make a change if you had a separate room for this. So if you had a separate room and you couldn't go to your client's office to work there, then it would be 100% deductible. But if it's not a separate room, it's not deductible. So it's not possible. So you need a door that you can close, and then it's deductible. So it's a bit better. So if you think about changing your room, so moving to another apartment, you could think about having an additional room. Then you can deduct those expenses from your income. So it's maybe a good idea if you're just thinking about moving.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about this, but does it affect your tax if you're in a registered relationship rather than being single?
Yeah, if you, it doesn't matter how you are registered. So if you are married, it doesn't make a difference to if you were single. So, but it just makes a difference at your income tax return at the end of the year. So during the year, it doesn't make a difference.
So
If you are married, you can choose to file together jointly, or you can choose to file single, whatever it's better for you.
I thought that there was some benefit in filing together.
Yeah, it's usually better. It's better, but this is something you can decide at the end of the year. Then you file your tax return. It's usually just one click if you use the software, and then it's going out. Choose single tax returns to the Finanzamt or just one jointly tax return.
But if you're both freelancers and you have to use an accountant, can you not do that?
Yeah, usually the accountant does this. If you advise him to file your tax return, they will probably just check this at the end of the year. It's usually jointly.
I think your accountant should
I will
actually
do this
optimize
automatically.
So that he would look at your situation and either file together or separate, whatever is better for your situation. But be aware that the more you earn, the less significant. If you both earn more, then I think, Andreas, is that correct? The less significant the savings are, right?
And does that apply
Yeah,
if you're in a registered partnership rather than married? Is it the same?
No, if you have these Lebenspartnerschaft, it's the same as married. So it doesn't make a difference, but you have to be married, yeah.
But you would also have to have the same accountant, right?
No, you don't have to have the same account, but of course it's better because one have to choose to file one return or two single returns. So it's yeah.
Okay.
And you don't have
you
to
could
pay
even change this if you after you filed your tax returns. So it's possible to change this after you filed your tax return. Okay. We were talking about job trainings, and so we had those. It just should about talking about travel expenses per diems. This is going in the same, let's say, basket thinking about. So if you're going to your job training outside, not a webinar, so of course you can deduct travel expenses. And travel expenses, of course, if you're going by train, this is a good example. You can also deduct car expenses. This is, but usually what's the most thing that taxpayers forget to deduct is per diems. So let's say if you're going for more than 8 hours a day outside of your home and working, then you can deduct per diems. It's 14 euros a day. It was 12 euros for the last day, 2019. Right now it's 14 euros. You can just deduct it for your income tax. And it works for job training. It also works just if you're working outside, going to the office of your client. And for more than 8 hours, then you can just deduct it. If you have, let's say, 100 days working outside, it's 1,400 euros that you just can deduct from your income tax and save some money. If you're going abroad, let's say to Brussels, the per diems are much higher. And in addition, you can deduct those per diems for staying overnight. So if you're not paying for the hotel, or if you're just staying overnight by a friend, then you have very high per diems that you can deduct. Just have to just keep it in mind if you file your 2020 or 2021 tax return, that those expenses can reduce your taxes.
Andreas, there's a question related to that. Are conferences related to your field of work deductible in some way?
Yeah, of course. Conferences, training, it's very similar, of course, because it's conference you're using for acquisition, for example. Then it's also
and maybe to add something, because we had this in another webinar. So if you go to a conference, say in Moscow, we had that, and stay on privately, you can still deduct the part of it that is related to your business. So you would have, say, if you stay 10 days and 3 of them are the conference, so then say 30% could be deductible for your business. That's correct, the way I put it, Andreas?
Yeah, that's correct. That's the same as job training. The easiest way is to divide it by the days. Let's say 3 days are working days, and you have 6 total days, and 50% are deductible of your flight expenses. That's
and
true.
the per diems also count for those kind of expenses then. So if I go to Moscow, I could look at the official table and see, okay, from Moscow, I get 50 euro per day tax-free, and I might even have the overnight stays.
Yeah, it also counts, but just for the days you were working, of course, not for the private days. Yeah. Just talking about at the end, let's say of restaurant receipts, you could deduct restaurant receipts if you invite someone for business reason. This is also most of my freelancing clients forget about this. They don't deduct restaurant receipts, because what are they doing if they are going on a business meeting? Both meeting members are paying their own meal. That's not a good idea to save some taxes. You should invite your business partner, and the next day your business partner should invite you, and both of you can save some taxes of those restaurant receipts. This is a very simple tax tip. You should do that too often. It must be plausible, of course. If you do it every day and you're working as a programmer, it's not plausible. But if you do this once a week, this is that's not a problem. Just put a note on this, the reason and the business partner, and then you can deduct those expenses. I think that's on the list.
We have about 10 seconds left, by the way. We're going to be immediately sent back to the other room.
Okay.
Then see you after the jump then. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
And if you have other questions, you can always reach us.